Hello and welcome to another Random Code stream. I'm going to be working on something that I found yesterday, and I was just trying to get a test in quick to show how this works, but I'll continue to do that right now. So, get some background music going. So what happened yesterday is I was working on something to, what was that? Oh, I was trying to make the shims that are used for default interface members do less. In fact, I thought they should never be called at all. But when I ran this integration test, I found out that was a mistake. And so I rolled all that back. But then I found a more subtle issue in something else completely unrelated. This new RockContext thing that I made. And so what happens, like in this test, is we're setting an expectation on this method to be called, but we don't have one for this method. We call this one. This is going to cause an expectation exception. But what should happen is, first of all, out of all of this, we should not see, well, what we should see is an expectation exception. So we should see something like this: assert, throw that. Okay, and then we say this. So we do all this. Throws type of, and then we're going to say this should be an expectation exception. And then we need to do expression bodied. Now let's pull this all over. So now that's what should happen. I never know if I should put the indented or not. Excuse me. So, but that's not what's going to happen. What we're going to get is a verification exception. Okay. Yep. And so that's not what we want. We want to see the expectation exception. And so the first thing I'm going to do is add to the expectations class. So if I go here and F12 into that, so you have expectations and this. So there is a thing on here that we also need to add another flag that will be set whenever we're about to throw an expectation exception. If somebody creates a callback that throws an exception, we can't do anything about that. That's the way they set it up. They're expecting that to happen. Okay. And so we don't do that there. But we'll say here, what did I call it? Was exception thrown. And then when our verify is called, we will say only if an instance is invoked and we didn't throw an exception. Now the other thing I'm going to do is within RockContext is provide a flag to say disable expectations or disable verifications. And so in disposed here, what I would say is only if if you disable them, because they're enabled by default, that's what you want. So as long as that's not set, we'll do the verification here. And the reason I want to put that in as well is because there may be a case where you're doing something, you get an exception from your code under test. We're not going to track that in rocks. We don't know about that. But because then some verifications haven't been met, you're going to run into this case anyway. And we can't do anything about it. So what we want to do is also have a case to say, have a test, public static void, causes verification exception, and context is disabled. So what you can do in this case is, and once I get the code in there, I'll be able to do it. And I don't even have the desktop audio on. Jesus. Is this will allow you then to say, I got some unexpected exception, and I don't want verification to run while I figure out what the problem is. And so I can turn it off, figure out what the issue is, get the test to work again, and then I can just remove that. So it gives you a way to switch that verification part off. All right. So once I get all my work done, what should happen is my integration tests should not fail. They should recompile just fine. I should also be able to run the code generation tests. The unit tests are going to break a lot because what's going to happen is now within generated code, this verify is going to change. And wherever we throw an expectation exception, there's going to be a line of code above it to say this dot was exception thrown, which will be true. So the comparison on the code generation string diffs is going to be different, and so it's going to cause those tests to fail, but I just have to go through those and fix them. And I'll do that off of stream because that would be incredibly boring to watch. As long as I get integration tests and code generation tests to pass with all this stuff, then I think we should be good, and I can make those changes off camera. Okay. So first thing we want to do is I got that in place. Let's put this in. I think this would be in rocks proper, right? Yeah. Private bool disable verification, and that will be false by default. Excuse me. So now we have this constructor here, which we want to keep as is. I think if I say bool disable verification is equal to false, no, not here. Sorry, that's the it's the create. I want to have a public rock context that does this. And then that would be a creates a new cref. Allows for verification to be disabled. The default is I forget. I think it's just you can say that. I thought there was a way that you can say like the bool false, and it knows what it means by that, but so we set that. I know you want me to do that. So now we say if not this dot disable verification, then we do that. So if you haven't disabled verification with this context, and that is by default, what should happen? So now we should be able to build everything, and nothing should fail because my integration test shouldn't fail. It should see that. Yep, and that's good. So that takes care of that problem. Now, what we also need is on expectation. So wait a minute, let me... So we could say use with verifications disabled. And what we should be able to assert here is let's do this. Var, get rid of that. Okay, and then we can say here, oh, this doesn't have the the instance on it because we're just using a custom expectations type. What we could do is say this. Assert that throws nothing. Well, no. Wait a minute, back all that out. That's not what I want to do. It's not about throwing exceptions here. There. Yeah, and we do want to capture that. Assert that false. And screw. So that shows then that we're doing the right thing. We're not in the case where we're saying disable it. So we got a tester on that now. Okay, cool. Now we need on expectations something that is protected. Determine if a mock through an exception I gotta be careful how I word this. Okay, so then what did I call this? Was exception thrown. Okay. Why is this? Oh. Do you even notice that I had a spelling mistake? Nice. Message. Lots of S's. Okay, so now we have that in place. And so we need to have everywhere where we're going to throw that exception, a new line of code to say this dot exceptions dot that thing. So and because I'm anal retentive, I like my stuff organized. To one, set the flag, and to two, and verify not to call it if that's set. Okay. So now we got to go into analysis and say, what is the so we want to find add this dot expectations was exception thrown equal to true before it. And then we also want to find if change to and not this dot was exception thrown. Okay. Actually, let's get our notes file together because I always like doing that. Okay. So somewhere within here in this current project, we're doing this. Okay, so what we want to do now is change it to if an instance was created and we didn't throw an exception. Oh no, that's in the constructor. We want to make sure in that case, so that's a little different. Right, the only place that is here. There. So that's that one. That was the easier of the two. Now we need to find oh, that's right, because I do it in one spot. Yippee! That makes it a little bit easier. There. Right line or right lines shouldn't matter either way. Okay. So now oh, it did it for there. That's right, because we have that. Nice. So let's make sure that that is the right thing. Was exception thrown. Yep. And we can see this because it's the same thing with was instance invoked, which we can actually do within the mock, because the mock is a nested type within expectations, a private nested type. And so it's able to see anything that the expectations are able to see. Okay. Yeah, I need to do another swipe of all my code and like put stuff like this. Let's capture that. But I don't want to do that until I'm sure the other stuff works. And it shouldn't break anything. It's just, it's a little bit easier to read if you have it as right lines. So, okay. First things first. Always got to work on the current thing, and then you can, if you see something you want to change, then make sure the first thing works and then go back and change that. Because if you start building in a whole bunch of changes, you might get into a case where now things are starting to break in other places that you really didn't want to focus on. So I do that sometimes. I do that and make too much, and then I get confused as to what I'm actually supposed to be doing. All right. So we have the change in the code. What should happen now is none of the integration tests, none of the code generation tests should fail. Except maybe that new code generation test integration test I put in for RockContext. So in this case, this should now actually work. Or I broke something in unreachable code detected. What does that mean? Maybe I have to go to... So in this case, what should have happened is, and not this was exception thrown. And then in here, we'd have wait. Why? That's bizarre. I've never even noticed that. Why is this doing this twice? So now it's just a generated thing that I did wrong. Right, because I didn't put it... But why is it doing it twice? And it says it passes. But that is bizarre. Why in the case of the setter, why are we doing that twice? And the getter, we just do it once. I don't even know why that's there. That should not happen. Okay, now that passes. I bet that that error, I bet, is because of the fact that it's a warning saying you have unreachable code, because it makes sense. That was just something that I had in there for a while. And that's going to cause some other code to break in the unit tests, but that's okay. Now it works. Okay. That's fine. I just never even noticed that. Let's say run these tests. One failed. Is it still the... Oh, I wonder if... I am just finding all sorts of... Oh, I wonder if he uses, say, occurred there. Nope, still failed. Why is it failing? I can't follow this. I hate that window. Okay. Expected. I don't see what's the difference. Is it now going to complain because... Okay, so hold on. Yeah, let's not look for case. That doesn't make any sense. If we make a verification... Am I looking in the wrong spot? Yes, I am. Okay. What is going wrong? I don't understand. I It still thinks it should be this, even though I just changed it. I thought I just changed it. Oh, that was something else. That's why. Okay. Okay. Sorry. It took me a second to realize. Now that works. If I come over here, that works too. Okay. 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 It's very easy to lose my place in things here. Let's run the tests again. They all pass now. Good. Let's go into RockContext. So now what we want to have is a test that shows that we don't get a verification exception. So let's. What we want to do now is say we make the context. We say this. We want. See, now it's expectation exception. Let's say enabled in this case. So now what we should see is if I put do stuff, now this should be a verification exception. Right. And now if I come into here and context is enabled, disabled. Okay. So now it should say throws nothing. Which isn't what you want, because you noticed that we were expecting this call, but we turned it off. We've been explicit about it. And again, I really want to push this RockContext because I think for static abstract members, this is almost going to become a requirement. So I need a way to be able to make this become what people want, but also to have the right workings on things here, if that makes sense. And so then I can also turn it off as needed. Part of me is wondering if I should make that a new excuse me, an enumeration, because it reads better that way. If you're exposing anything out to the world, it's arguably better if you have like a flag that says disable verification yes or disable verification no. Let's do that. I kind of like that better. So if we come up to rocks, RockContext, let's have disable verification. And this will be a public enum where the default is no and yes. Allows a user to disable, to specify context verification. Specify context verification in cref RockContext. Does not disable verification. Disables verification. So that's the first part. Let's come into RockContext. Let's change this to being disable verification, which by default will be no. And then we say disable verification. Its default should be disable no. And we set that. And then down here, equals. Then we do that. Okay, so that's the first part. And then we come down to Rock's tests. Now the code generation is still broken, but I'll fix that in a moment. Let's see if these tests, they all pass, good. Now I need to come in and say, everywhere where I put this, no, this is still a flag. Sorry, that I just realized that. That's okay. It was just the bool. Okay, so that actually helps, because then on the integration tests here, when we have a RockContext test, yeah, this is now there. Let's shut down, start up again, do that jazz. And let's say run all the tests on the integration. They all pass. Let's run code generation tests. While that's going, let's see what the pain is going to be on Rock's tests. It's going to be like 150. Oh, no. Sorry. Those all pass. Analysis tests. It's usually like 150 to 200 when I make a change like this that affects most of the code generation files, or what the code is that's generated. My wife just said, I sent her just a random video of cats begging for food this morning, and she was like, oh, I needed that. I'm like, hey, sometimes we need to have fun things just to cheer us up, you know? Yeah, 200 failed. That's fine. That's totally expected. So while my tests are still running, let's come up to the change log. And let's get an entry in for 920, which we are not releasing just yet. Added a disable verification flag to RockContext to allow developers to temporarily disable verification. And that is issue 377. Okay. We could also say this is a fix. changed RockContext to not verify on, no, it's not in the RockContext. Change expectations to not call verify if the mock through a code generated exception. Which is generally correct. Okay, we're getting near the end. Did I change in the build props? No, let's make that 9.2. See if we get any more errors here. Nope, that's good. That's a good call. Git commit made changes in RockContext and expectations. Things are looking good. But we're not done yet because the tests need to break. So that's what I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to get rid of that. Done. Done. Fix all unit tests. And then I'm going to go back into the property builder and make this. This is something that I occasionally run into, and I want to have like write lines where I'm just doing a bunch of write line calls. The write lines ends up doing that. It ends up taking the multi-line string that you made, breaks it up, and puts it into separate line calls. But I find that to be actually easier to read than a bunch of write line calls. So I try to change that wherever possible. And I'll just do that off camera. So I think we're good with this change. I like what it does. And I think it handles what it needs to handle when it should and not when it can't. So again, if you throw an exception, and maybe I should add that here real quick. If I come back into like integration tests, callback cause, like let's do that. Let's have a callback. So in this case, we're going to say throw new. It doesn't matter what it throws. So we're going to call this. We're going to get this exception, but we're not going to detect it, and we're going to get a verification exception. That's expected. Now let's disable it. So now we say here, let's disable it. And now what we should get is that, hopefully. Yeah, there's 5. I thought there was 5 already, but cool. So that just shows that it's doing what we want it to do. So if you did something in your setups that inadvertently causes something bad to happen, it could be in a callback, it could just be in what your mocks do that end up causing some other code to fail. You will still get, if you have other expectations set, those could mask it. We don't want to say causes exception. We just want to say how it causes exception and verification fails and context is enabled. What we could also do here is show that if you don't have any verification issues. So in other words, what I'm doing here is I'm saying I want do other stuff to be called, but do stuff gets called. So let's do that. Now in both cases, we should see whether you've disabled it or not. We should see that exception from the code. Yep, and that works as expected. Cool. So this only comes up if you put in other expectations that haven't been met yet, and then that will in the suppose inadvertently cause a verification exception to occur, which you're like, yes, that's true because you didn't end up calling this. But it's because something else went wrong. And so then you can turn this off in your test and see, yes, I'm throwing a not implemented exception. That's really what's going on. Yes, that's what I did here because I'm dumb. And then you can remove it, remove this, and then see that your test passes. I like that. Okay. So I will clean all this up off camera, because the test, because I need to, and do a little bit of code change as well. Excuse me. The next issue that I'm going to be doing is this. I've been pushing this off for a while. I put this in 2024, and I've known about it even before that. So this is where I want Rocks to be able to support static abstract members and interfaces, either as methods, properties, or even operators. That will be a new one, that you can support operators, because you can do that with SAMIs. So I did a lot of work. I got to clean this up because I talked about expectations disposable. That's not a thing anymore. So that has to go away. I have to make the mock type public, because if you need to call something statically, you have to be able to talk to the type. So in that case, I will make the nested type public. Not desirable, but there's no other way to get around it. So I think this is going to be a decent chunk of work to get done and make sure that I don't break anything and that it works the way I expect it to. Especially in tests that are running in parallel. That's going to be the big one. So, yeah. I imagine that's going to take a lot of time. But that's the next thing I'm going to work on in Rocks. I also want to start doing some other random code videos, just doing another kind of thing. And I may do that on Saturday and then work on this starting on Sundays. We'll see. But for this stream, that's it. I want to thank anybody who's been watching, or if you're watching right now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, please do so. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm getting close, but any new subscription will help getting there. So I thank you in advance for subscribing to the channel. The schedule upcoming is this afternoon and maybe this evening after The Last of Us. I will be doing more Hollow Knight streams, and that will also happen on Tuesday and Thursday. Probably will do random code streams. I think are kind of falling under the Saturday and or Sunday morning scenario. So that's probably where I'm going to be doing those. But they can come up at random points here, there, and everywhere. Why are you doing this? Because no one's watching? Because I want to. Somebody could watch it later. So I've had other people watch stuff in the morning. That's why. So anyway, so with that, I want to thank everybody for watching, and I am going to stop the stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.